This is Jonathan Agoff here for Pro Boxing Fans. Delighted to be joined by esteemed trainer Kevin Barry over Zoom. Kevin, how you been? How's the family been? We've had a quick chat off camera, but yeah, how's things been over in Las Vegas?
Well, hey, Jonathan, great to be with you and Pro Boxing Fans. And you and I've talked about it for a while, so I'm pleased I'm finally on with you. Look, obviously the pandemic was a pretty testing time for everyone. And, things happened in the world that we've never seen in our lifetime. So it's made things very challenging. It's made us all appreciate the lives that we have so much more. And just appreciate life in general. Like there's been so much life lost throughout this whole time. Here in America, we've got 116,000 people dead, which is epic proportions. It's so friggin' bad. We had big plans for this year for our team at Team Barry and our fighters, and obviously, with the pandemic, everything was put in check. But mate, we've got the gym back open again, and we were in an event a week ago, and life's sort of, I wouldn't say it's getting back to normal, because the new normal is totally different from what we had. But I've got a son that's actually lost a spleen playing high school football, and so we've had to be very, very careful with him. And he's at UNLV, but we had him here on, because he was compromised, we had him locked in the house for 8 weeks, which was a pretty rough time for him. But my gym, I've mentioned this to a few people. I think I was definitely one of the lucky ones that the private gym I have here in Vegas is a 1-minute drive from my house. I could walk it in 5 minutes. So every day during the shutdown, I would split my day at around 1 o'clock. I would go to the gym, I'd ride the bike for an hour, I'd do my shoulder strengthening work for my pad work, a little bit of exercise. I'd walk around and I'd look at the pictures on the walls, and I'd tell myself, look, we're going to get through this. We're going to get back to normal. But that was my release every day, and I know a lot of people didn't have that. So I found myself very fortunate.
I mean, taking you back to February when I first met you and kindly had us over to your gym in Las Vegas, it didn't seem like this was sort of going to happen. I mean, we didn't speak about it. No one was really speaking about it. And then all of a sudden, within sort of a week, when I sort of got back to London, or 2 weeks, we were all in lockdown.
I know. It was bizarre. But, as I mentioned before, that, no one could see this coming. Well, we couldn't see it coming anyway. I know there are experts around the world who have been talking about a pandemic coming for the last 5 years, but I think they're a little bit smarter than you and I. But when it came, we just had to realize, okay, now we have to deal with it. We were all placed in a position of huge responsibility, and I felt a little bit disappointed with a lot of people who just played the whole thing down and said, this is it. It's been the media are blowing it up. The government are ignoring it. It was like it was really hard for a start to realize just what we were involved in. But when you saw the way it spread globally, we knew it was real. I tell you one thing that I was very, very proud of is I was proud as a New Zealander living here in America at the job that Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, did. She and her team did an amazing job of shutting it down right at the beginning. And if a lot of other countries had followed her guidance, I think I know the end result would have been a lot different. No one likes to have borders closed, but that was the only way of protecting your country. Now, here in America, our borders have never been closed right throughout this, and we have, as I mentioned, we have 116,000 people dead. We have a second wave that's very, very evident coming through the country at the moment. Some people are thinking that it'll shut the country down worse than the first wave. So look, I don't think we're out of the woods yet, but I think it's something that everyone has to take their part in this to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a bit of positive news a couple of weeks ago now, a week ago, I think. Your man Guido Vianello, I guess, part of a bit of history on the first Top Rank show back. Give us an insight of what the procedures were like with this sort of new start in boxing. I saw you with your mask on, and there's a lot of I guess procedures inside the MGM.
Look, and I tell you what, it was great to be back. It was also great to be back at the first show, the first televised boxing event since the shutdown. And we're with Top Rank for a reason. They're a very, very good company, very professional company. I also have Umar Salamov with them. They weren't going to start boxing back without doing their homework. And, they worked very, very hard. We had a 30-page list of rules and regulations. The protocols were very, very extensive. Most of the people fighting on that Tuesday, June 9th card were in Vegas, had flown into Vegas on the Friday, some on the Thursday, some on the Saturday. We never checked in because we live here. They wanted me in on Saturday. We got in on the Sunday. Once we got there, because I knew it wasn't going to be an enjoyable experience. It was going to be, we were there for a reason, right? It was for this fight. We got there on the Sunday. We were tested. We had to remain in our bedrooms for 10 hours, which took us into the night. We were told you would be contacted if you were positive. If you weren't contacted, you're okay. So obviously we woke up the Monday morning and there were no calls. So that was a good sign. We had breakfast. Now, let me tell you, when you leave your bedroom, and the wing that we stayed in, we were the only ones in that wing. There was security on an elevator that no one in the general population was using. It was only used for the people associated with the event. Masks were mandatory. When you would go for your breakfast, lunch, dinner, your fighter meetings, your photograph sessions, to look at the venue, anything, you would be escorted by security down the elevator in an underground walkway into a van. Now the van, which would drive about 300 yards to the area where everything was. We had a makeshift kitchen. We had, rooms for the weigh-in. We had rooms for the photo shoots. We had rooms for the media. And then the actual boxing venue was all part of this area. So everything is combined to one area. Every time that you would enter that area, your temperature would be taken. You would have to put hand sanitizer on your hands. And obviously you wouldn't get in if you didn't have your mask on. Now, everyone was wearing masks, but there were also masks there. So, after arriving on the Sunday, we had breakfast on Monday and lunch. We had photo shoots and a fighter meeting. Then we had to be tested again. So once we were tested again, you remain for a second time in your bedroom for 10 hours. So look, it was very, very boring and very tedious. But, we were lucky. We were there for Sunday, Monday. The fight was Tuesday, and immediately after the fight, we were gone. Now, fight night, everything was the same with the commission, was there with you the whole time, but, you had, which we didn't have before, we had gloves on fight night. We had to keep gloves on all the time. You could take your mask off in the dressing room, but as soon as you walked out of that dressing room, your mask was on. There was instructions from the commission that anyone taking gloves off or their masks off, would be suspended. So they were taking things very, very seriously. It was a unique experience for the simple fact that there was no crowd. There was no commentators. The commentators, one was in the studio and the rest of them were broadcasting from home. So those things were very, very different. We were fortunate. Guido took care of his business, very, very quickly and comfortably. But I sort of was thinking, if you actually had your fighter in a 10-round contest and it was going 10 rounds, it would have been a little bit nervy and a little bit eerie. The fact that you can hear every punch. There is no crowd noise. I thought it looked tremendous on TV. That ESPN and Top Rank had done a great job. The other thing I'll say to you is, upon leaving the ring, there was a quick interview section set up. Then you're back to the dressing room, and immediately you're off back to your bedroom. So you can't stay around and watch the other fights or anything like that. As soon as your particular contest is over, you must leave. So we couldn't wait to leave. We went straight back to the bedroom, quick shower, and half an hour later I was home at my house, and we're having a beer outdoors with some of Guido's friends and my family and a couple of friends.
Wow, I mean, it's probably more intense than I actually thought it would be.
It was very intense. Believe me, it was very, very intense.
I mean, in terms of the performance, as you say, Guido didn't hang around. First round knockout win. Were you pleased with the performance and victory?
Look, I was very pleased. He's now 7-0, 7 KOs. He came to me end of June last year. We've had 3 fights together, and he has improved with each fight. And we've fought decent opponents for a young guy who's just starting on his way. Our first fight was like 7-1. The next fight, the opponent was 8-1, and this was a step up. Donald Hainsworth was 16-3 with 14 KOs, and he had gone a few rounds with Bryant Jennings, and he had fought another top 10 Chinese, that Zhang Zhai, or whatever his name is. So we knew that this being the first show, it was going to have a good audience. We knew that this was Guido's first time on ESPN live on the main platform, so it was very important for us to put on a good display. And the way that a game plan was good. We were supposed to fight Hainsworth on March 29 in Quebec, and of course they cancelled the Quebec show 2 weeks prior to that. And at that particular stage, Guido had sparred 94 rounds, which was an incredible amount of rounds for a guy fighting a 6-round contest. And part of the makeup of that 94 rounds was he was sparring Tyson Fury. he was sparring Joe Joyce, who had the upcoming fight coming up with Daniel Dubois. He sparred a bunch of rounds with Joseph Parker. He sparred a couple of rounds with Carlos Takam. So we're talking very, very high-level elite sparring. So I was so excited in the preparation for that fight in Canada, and so disappointed on a number of fronts that they cancelled it. But we had to deal with it. So it was fortunate for us that Brad Goodman and Bruce Trampler were able to keep the opponent in, and that became our opponent for June 9. So the way that he got him behind his jab, the way he controlled the distance, and when the opportunity was there for the right hand, he closed the show really quickly. I was very, very pleased with him.
And you mentioned a bit off camera that you're looking to get him out pretty soon, in the next sort of few weeks, few months.
We've been offered a fight towards the end of July. Again, as part of the Top Rank ESPN program. They're doing 2 shows a week. Guido went to California for 5 days after the fight. He got back here Tuesday, and our camp started then. He's in very good shape at the moment. We're just going to keep building and developing and getting better every single time that he gets out there. And we're excited being able to turn this around very, very quickly and fight the very next month.
Let's move on to Joseph Parker. When we last spoke, you said to me you wanted a dominant display out in Texas against Shawndell Winters. On 2 fronts, I suppose you'd have been happy with the performance against Winters, who was a pretty game opponent, and secondly, that Joseph managed to get out, I guess, before sort of the pandemic, because before then there'd been quite a bit of inactivity.
Oh my gosh, we were so blessed to get that fight under our belt on February 28. And Joe and I had many conversations since then, said, thank God we had that fight, because we fought once in 2019. And when you're at the level and position of heavyweight world boxing where Joe is, you must be in the ring fighting. So for us, our plan was to fight 3 times this year, and then of course, when the pandemic struck, we were thinking this might be the only fight he gets all year. One is, it was great for him to get back into the ring. Winters had the NABA title. He'd pulled off a couple of upset wins. We know that, he was on a bit of a high, but I also expected Joe to destroy him and knock him out. And we ended up with a tremendous knockout where Joe actually hit him with the right hand, stepped around him, hit him with the right hand, 45, which was an uppercut, another right hand. Every punch landed. And that made me very, very pleased, because it was good, accurate punching, and he closed the show like he should close the show, like an elite fighter. So we've now had 3 knockout wins in our last 3 fights. Prior to that, we have 5 fights in a row that had all gone the distance, all gone 12 rounds. So, but we're talking different level of opposition. When you're talking Carlos Takam, Andy Ruiz, Hughie Fury, Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte. So we're talking top level fighters. But it's nice for Joe to start feeling his power again and wanting to knock guys out when he steps into the ring with them. Right at the moment, and we may be, quite fortunate for the fact that the great job that New Zealand have done containing this virus, that everything is opened up there at the moment. Last Saturday, there was a rugby game between the Blues and the Hurricanes, and there's 40,000 people there. So because of that, they're at level 1. So, David Higgins, Joe's manager and Eddie Hearn are looking at the moment. We're looking at the possibility of Joe lining up in September in New Zealand. We've had, or Higgins has had, meetings with a lot of different cities around the country. Mate, you're still there? You've gone sort of black on me.
Probably can't see me too well. The sun's coming a bit here in London. Let me open the...
That's okay.
That should be a bit better. I was gradually...
I was thinking, are we still on? No, so look, there's, especially the Mayor of Queenstown on the South Island was very excited about the possibility. So for us, because that we can have a crowd, there is a strong possibility that we'll see Joe fighting in New Zealand in September. Now, at the moment, we know he's been making a lot of videos that have gone viral around the world, and it's kept him very, very relevant, and he's entertained a lot of people. But one thing I will say, Joseph Parker has also been training very hard. Throughout the lockdown, he had a gym at his house, would FaceTime me every other day, coach, I'm just getting going, so look, his weight is good. He's very strong. Now that he's back into the weight gym, he's lifting heavier than he's ever lifted before. His strength levels are through the roof. And we're excited about the possibility of when it looked like, this may be doom and gloom for us, as are the prospects for a lot of the other top heavyweights in the world. We have been given a lifeline for the great job that New Zealand have done. So I expect to hear over the next week or so that there is a confirmed date in September. I've got Guido fighting towards the end of July, and that being the case, I'll leave the day after his fight to fly to New Zealand to go into quarantine for 2 weeks before starting Joe's training camp for his September fight.
So are you expecting Joe's next fight to be with a crowd?
Yes, I am. Yes, most definitely.
And
it'll be the first event with a crowd in that part of the world. It'll be one of the first boxing events with a crowd in any part of the world.
So, but how big could the crowd be? I mean, if you have 40,000 for a rugby game, is it just dependent on the situation come September?
No, it'll be, I think at the moment, David Higgins has an idea of doing a special corporate event. But there'll also be, the opportunity for the public. But, we're looking, not to do a massive event. The most important thing for us is that we get a good event that we can cover all the costs. We have the right opponent, and we do a live TV event. There is interest at the moment of the fight going to the UK, going to America, and obviously, those fights in New Zealand, they go on pay-per-view through New Zealand, Australia, the Pacific Islands. Yeah. So that is a very exciting thing for us to look forward to. But more than anything else, it's being able to resurrect a year that looked like it was going to be as inactive as 2019, when we only fought once.
Yeah. There has been a few names mentioned. Obviously, the possibility of flying in, say, opponents from the UK or the Europe seems unlikely, but there's been a few names mentioned, including Lucas Brown, Dempsey McKean's been mentioned.
Yes.
Do you have any idea of who the opponent might be? Could it be one of those two, perhaps?
It's definitely a strong possibility that it'll be someone from Australia, but there is also a very real possibility that it'll be someone from the UK or America, because let's remember, I'm flying from Vegas back home, going into quarantine for 2 weeks. So it's not something that can't be done.
Picking this back up with Kevin Barry. Right. So we spoke about Joseph Parker, the next move for him. What about Umar Salamov, your light heavyweight, ranked number 1 by the WBO?
Well, look, we're really excited for Umar, and we were really excited when we signed him the top rank for a promotional contract, which put us in a really nice position for that 4-way box off for the WBO World Light Heavyweight title. Umar's lucky back home in Chechnya at the moment, as is his opponent, Maxim Vlasov, who's in Russia. So both these guys have borders closed at the moment. There was a tentative date that was made earlier in the year by Bob Arum for July 4. But obviously we're well past that now. So that fight, it's half of a 4-way box off. It's a fight that now won't take place till maybe September or October, but all that will be sort of confirmed once we know the state of the borders in Chechnya and Russia. But Umar at 25-1, 19 KOs is a very, very good talent. But he's up against a real tough guy in Maxim Vlasov, 45-3. It's a huge record. Vlasov has fought for world titles at super middleweight, light heavyweight, and cruiserweight. So he thinks that this is his big opportunity to finally secure a title. It's an exciting fight, and it's a fight that one is I have to have Salamov here. I've got to have him in a good training camp, but a fight that also he must be at his very, very best. It's a guy that I've always had big raps in, a guy that is fearless. He'll jump into the ring and spar Guido. He'll jump into the ring and spar Joseph Parker. No hesitation. And I love that about him, and it's part of his upbringing. Not only is he very skillful, but he's hard as nails.
How long have you worked with him for?
Well, we've worked with each other off and on for about a little over 3 years. We've done 5 fights. And he was with another promotional company. He was having a lot of his fights back in either Moscow or Chechnya, and with Joe's schedule, it never really worked out a bunch of times. But I took him down to New Zealand where he won the WBO international title. I took him to Australia. We've had a few very good sound performances together. I first met Umar Salamov back in 2015 when Klitschko was fighting Bryant Jennings, and Joseph Parker and my other heavyweight at the time, Izu Ugano, were part of the sparring partners that Klitschko invited into camp. And here was this, at that time, he was a 21-year-old Umar Salamov, light heavyweight, who was standing there going toe-to-toe with Klitschko. And I just went, are you kidding me? I'd never seen anything like it. He had no English whatsoever. And we befriended him, and he sort of there was like a large contingent of Russian trainers and fighters there, but he joined our team. And so, we looked after him, we trained him, we took him through punches, I cornered him when he sparred, and the relationship grew from there.
So as part of this tournament, you've got Vlasov. Am I right in thinking Aleyda Alvarez is part of that? And
yes, Alvarez is fighting Joe Smith. That's the other half of the equation.
Okay.
We know Alvarez is a tough guy, former world champion. Joe Smith, well, they don't get any tougher than Joe Smith. So that that's an exciting fight. So and they need to be exciting fights, because let's remember, this is the belt that Canelo vacated. So, I'm sure the WBO and Parker would like to see a really good champion fulfill that role.
So when are you hoping this fight happens?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish I knew exactly, when the borders in Russia and Chechnya would be open. But, then once they are open, then we need time for a good training camp. And, like he's training at the moment, but it's not the type of training camp that I need him to have to be successful, in a fight like this. But I'm thinking, maybe October.
Kevin, I do want to take you back to February. We spoke during Wilder Fury fight week. Did you expect to see what we saw in the MGM that night?
No, not at all. And it was very funny because I looked at both guys, and I looked at the first fight, and I looked at I thought the first fight, Tyson obviously fought out of his skin. I thought the biggest improvements should have been made by Deontay Wilder, because he had a horrible first fight. And but I couldn't have been further wrong. And in fact, I'll give all props to my mate Joe Parker, who right throughout that particular training camp, he goes, Tyson's going to knock him out. Tyson's going to knock him out. And I went, really? And Joe and I, it was funny, Joe and I sat in the third row in Tyson's corner, one row behind Tyson's wife. And Joe was very excited. And I was just dumbfounded. It's like it was a masterful performance. A performance of somebody with a very high boxing IQ. And the very next day, Joe and my son Taylor went round to see Tyson in his room at the hotel, and my son FaceTimed me and put me on with Tyson. And he goes, "Hey, are you proud of me?" And I said, "Oh my God, I couldn't be any more proud of you. It was an amazing performance." But it was, I never saw that coming, like a lot of other people.
No, definitely. I mean, there does look like there will be a third fight when, I'm not sure anyone knows, there's the talk of October, November. What can Deontay Wilder do to win a third fight? Is there anything that you would advise him that you see he could do, improve by a third fight?
Well, obviously when you're fighting somebody with the height and the boxing skill of a Tyson Fury, you have to find a way to take that jab away. And, I think you cannot afford to wait. You cannot afford to allow Tyson to be first and to dictate the terms, because once Tyson had Wilder take the weight off his front foot and move backwards, there was nothing coming back at him. That was his whole game. The only way that he was as menacing and as destructive with his right hand was because he was coming forward in the past and was able to put that weight on his front foot and then fire that rocket right hand. But the game plan by Tyson was simply perfect. So when you ask what can he do, I thought if there was going to be any changes, there would have been in the second fight. It's for me, it's going to be hard to anticipate him changing a great deal in fight 3, even though he needs to.
So is it
because if the same guy enters the ring, the result will be the same.
Is there the only way that he can win a third fight is by knocking Fury out with the right hand?
No, I think but he has to find a way to take Fury's jab out of the equation. When guys have good jabs, you jab with a jabber. You take their jab away. And there's various ways he can do it. It's just, whether or not he's going to, at this particular stage, be prepared to wind the clock back and try to learn new things. because, what he had just simply wasn't good enough.
It was announced last week that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua have agreed financial terms for a 2-fight deal in 2021. Obviously, a lot of stuff has to happen before then.
Yeah.
What was your reaction, first of all, to that news being announced?
Look, I think it's exciting for all boxing fans. Everyone wants to see a unified heavyweight champion. It's been a long, long time since we've had one. We've got some very good fighters around at the moment. And I think it will give more credibility, and the winner of that fight will become the global champion. And I think once again, I remember, God, 20 years ago, and it used to be the heavyweight champion of the world was referred to as the baddest man on the planet. Well, I think the winner of that fight will once again be the baddest man on the planet. It's a fight that it'll do massive numbers. But like you said, there's a lot of things that have to take place. There are also a lot of people on the fringes, Usyk being one with the WBO. I see the WBO came out yesterday and they said they won't allow a step aside. Interesting. Then we've got Dillian Whyte sitting there and he's threatening all sorts of legal things as being the mandatory to fight the winner of Fury and Wilder fight 3. So, it's going to get messy. There's going to be legal action. But I think the boxing world and the sporting world will be holding their breath and wanting to see that fight, because it's a fight that we all want to see.
Now, as we mentioned, there are a lot of hurdles in the way. We talk about Kubrat Pulev, the mandatory, which we expect to happen. The third fight with Wilder and Fury, and Wilder, as you say, if he takes the jab away, you never know. He could beat Fury. We don't know.
You can never ever look with Wilder. You have to give him a puncher's chance. It doesn't matter who he fights. If he was to fight Superman or Batman, you still give him a chance because you know that he's got a massive right hand. But just looking at fight 2, you really have to, you really have to challenge yourself to find a way other than that right hand for him to win a fight 3.
As you mentioned, sort of the WBO and Oleksandr Usyk, obviously that's another hurdle in the way with his mandatory is supposed to happen straight after Kubrat Pulev should Joshua come through that. If there is a scenario where the title gets vacated, then Joseph Parker is currently rated number 2 with the WBO. So are you thinking from sort of your perspective that a fight for a vacant title could happen?
Look, I would really like to stretch my imagination that far to believe that would happen. But I also am well aware that with them trying to put together, and it's not an easy task to make a undisputed heavyweight world champion fight. And we know that because we haven't seen one for a long, long time. So we know a lot has to go into that. So look, I think there's a pretty good chance that it will happen. And I know what you're saying, and I've had this discussion with David Higgins, and I've had this discussion with Joseph Parker many times over the last 12 months, thinking that this may happen. Look, if it does happen, we'll be lobbying very, very hard. We've made no secret to the fact that we would love to be the guy to really test Oleksandr Usyk. And Joe, being the WBO former heavyweight champion, has all the credentials, and sitting there at number 2, we would have to be given that opportunity if it ever presented itself, and we would welcome it with open arms.
There is talk as well of Tyson Fury potentially being awarded franchise status. Now, again, this is not confirmed at all. It's just been, I think Bob Arum mentioned the possibility of this happening.
Yes, he did.
All up to the WBC. What's your thoughts on if this was to happen? Because a lot of people would then think that it wouldn't be classed as technically an undisputed fight.
Once again, there are talks of things getting very messy.
Mm.
Look, I'd like, if they ever fought, I'd like to see it as it stands at the moment. But look, we also have to be, we have to be honest. God, Dillian Whyte has sat there forever. If anyone deserves a crack at the world title, it's Dillian Whyte. We still have a lot of bad memories of the fight that Joe had with him, and we think that he was very, very lucky. One with the officiating, and two with not being knocked out in the last round. But all that aside, I think the guy deserves, with the caliber of opponents that he's been fighting and the length of time that he has sat there as a mandatory, I think he deserves a shot at the WBC title, whether you like him or not.
I mean, if you were to face Dillian Whyte again, because he did come out a few times during this period of talking about sort of fighting Andy Ruiz. He mentioned Joe this name, commented on a few of the videos, etc. Right. If you guys were to fight Dillian Whyte again, how would you sort of, what would be different from your end? What would you have to do to win? I know you've mentioned it was a very close fight, but what would you have to do perhaps to win?
Well, I'll tell you what, the first and foremost, we would have to make sure that we had a referee that was unbiased and had total control of the fight, and not somebody who was in Dillian Whyte's pocket. And I say that by out of total disclosure, walking into the dressing room before the fight and planting a kiss on Dillian's forehead. That refereeing was appalling. What Dillian was able to do in that fight with Joseph Parker, not only fouling him early, but fouling him constantly after that. We all saw it, from choking him to try and throwing him over the top rope. Joe had both legs off the ground at one stage. Look, it was a fight that in any other country in the world, not only would have he had points taken off, he probably would have been disqualified. If those two ever fight each other again, by God, that it's going to be fireworks, it's going to be anger, it's going to be aggression, and there's going to be a lot of very bad intention punches being thrown from the first bell.
Just staying with Dillian Whyte for a moment, there's been talk of him having a UFC fight, and I think Eddie Hearn mentioned sort of today or yesterday about him versus Derek Chisora, who's also looking to go into the MMA. What do you think of that as an MMA fight?
Look, will I watch it? Yeah, of course I'd watch it. But I mean, am I interested in it? Not really. Yeah, look, I tell you what, Dillian Whyte, as I mentioned, deserves his shot. But he also needs to be very careful, because like even an old Alexander Povetkin is still a dangerous opponent. He still has a little bit left. We saw the fight with Joshua, he was in that fight until he got clipped, and he was hitting Joshua with more punches than a lot of people thought he would. The fight with Michael Hunter, he was a little lucky, but he also had Hunter badly hurt a couple of times during that fight. The other thing, you got Dillian Whyte calling out Andy Ruiz. Personally, I think if he wants to have the opportunity of fighting for the WBC title, that would be the last guy that I'd be calling out while I'm waiting for my opportunity to fight for a heavyweight title. Andy Ruiz is a very powerful, very skillful, very awkward style for Dillian Whyte. And he would be one of the last guys I'd be calling out if I was Dillian Whyte. In fact, I think Andy Ruiz knocks Dillian Whyte out.
I just want to stay with Joshua Fury talk for a moment. As we sit here right now, and there's probably going to be quite a lot that changes between now and when we eventually see the fight. What's your gut feeling at the moment of how that fight would play out?
Look, I think at the moment, I think Tyson Fury is the smartest, best heavyweight in the world. I don't think that after his performance against Klitschko, I don't think he ever really got the respect that he deserved. And we all know what happened after that. We know what physically and emotionally and mentally he did to himself. But then he clawed his way back and shocked the world with the first fight against Wilder. He showed why he is the elite boxer in the heavyweight division. And I tell you what, Tyson is the type of guy that he needs the big fights. He gets up for the big fights. And the fights in between, I don't think they help him at all, because, you know, you look at the two fights that he had before his first fight against Wilder. You look at the two fights he had after that first fight against Wilder. He looked like another heavyweight. But we know that when the big fights are in front of him, a different Tyson Fury enters the ring. And that's why, you know, I've heard a few people saying he shouldn't be signing a contract to fight Anthony Joshua before he takes care of Wilder. I think Tyson is the type of guy, he needs those challenges. He needs real dangerous guys in front of him for us to get the very best Tyson Fury that there is. I think the other thing is mentally he is a nightmare for Anthony Joshua. That will be, we saw glimpses of cracks in his game when Joe fought him. When we were, talking about his jaw, and especially when David Higgins sort of went on a 2-month rant saying that, Joe was going to knock him out and Joshua had a glass jaw. And I think those sort of things, got to him. And we saw, different clinks in his armor. Well, if you compare the noise that David Higgins made compared to the noise that Tyson Fury is going to make, and the seeds that he's going to plant in Anthony Joshua's mental state, there is no comparison. There is nobody in the game who's as skilled in the ring and is mentally dominating and ferocious out of the ring as Tyson Fury.
Kevin, I appreciate you giving me all this time today. Before I leave you, one more question. Tyson Fury made some comments to BT Sport, I believe, where he said that he could compete in every heavyweight era and sort of beat everyone of the past. What do you make of those comments?
Well, I tell you what, if you look at a lot of those eras, well, the obvious era that we're just coming after now is Klitschko. Well, we know he beat Klitschko, and Klitschko was undefeated for 10 years. Who did we go before that? Lennox, and then we've got you got Holyfield and Tyson. You look at the trouble that that Tyson had with Holyfield. You look at the trouble that Holyfield had with Riddick Bowe, and Riddick Bowe was 6'5". Tyson Fury is 6'9". Tyson Fury is a monster. And then when we go back further than that, the heavyweights, are small. I think it's a fair statement. I think he would be a handful for anyone at his best. When the guy is all business, when he has the challenge in front of him that mentally makes him fire up and get up for it, I think he's competitive with anyone. And we look at, and people say, and they do say, oh, Mike Tyson would destroy him. He's too powerful, he's too explosive. Well, look at the, God, I want to say Plinkton Thomas, fight went the distance. gosh, the other guy's name, I can see his picture of him, but, you know, fights that people thought Tyson would knock them out in 1 or 2 rounds, and he ended up, you know, winning points decisions. And they were like 6'5". I think one was 6'6". Nothing compared to the 6'9" Tyson Fury.
Okay, well, Kevin, I appreciate you coming on, taking out all this time of your day, and
well, hey, all I'll tell you is this: I said to Guido, "Look, I'm on with Jonathan at 10.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be at the gym shortly after 10:30. So he's been at the gym since 10 o'clock. It's now 10 past 11. I'll get down there, and I'm going to have to spar Guido today because of you."
I wish you the best of luck with that.
Hey, Jonathan, great talking to you, mate, and being on with you and pro boxing fans. And you and I will talk again.
No, I really appreciate that, Kevin. And yeah, I wish you all the very best to all your family. And I look forward to hearing some more fight news.
Okay, mate.
Take care.
Take care.